One one of the things that I love to have at my house is fruit. I grew up with fruits, especially growing up for the early part of my childhood in a country that has an abundance of fruits. Uh, and one of the things that I remember distinctively about my childhood is my very first Pathfinder camporee. I was barely old enough to join, and my father allowed me to go camping with the Pathfinder group. And this was a club camp out in the middle of nowhere, where we bathed in the stream and cooked over an open fire. At the time, I was about 9.5 years old. I wasn't quite 10. And I remember one of the things that really marked that experience and made it real interesting for me was once we arrived at our campsite, or it wasn't even a campsite, it was just a field. And in the back of the field, it was very dense woods and forest. But by the road, there were two massive trees. Two trees that once I looked at it, I realized they were full of tangerines. But it's not the typical tangerine tree or orange tree that you see in a Florida farmland where they're not very tall. This one was about decades old, and it was producing lots and lots of fruit, so much so that we had to climb it in order for us to reach the best fruits that it offered. And I remember spending hours there at that tree, on that tree, collecting that bright orange, delicious fruit. And that was one of the things that highlighted my very first Pathfinder camporee. In the Bible, in the book of Luke, chapter 13, verses 6 through 9, as it was read earlier today, I want to go back and revisit this. We find a fruit tree that was not bearing fruit. And the Bible says, reading from the New King James Version, and he also spoke a parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in a vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. How disappointing. For somebody who loves fruit and is expecting to find a tree that is supposed to be bearing fruit, and you come up to that tree and you don't find any, that is an extremely disappointing moment. And for him, the Bible tells us, Jesus tells us in the stories, that then he said to the keeper of his vineyard, "Look, for 3 years I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree and find none. Cut it down. Why does it use up the ground?" But he answered to him, he said, "Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and fertilize it. And if it bears fruit, okay, well, so good. But if not, after that, I will cut it down." It's interesting that a fig tree actually produces fruit. If you plant it from the seed, it takes about 3 to 4 years, depending on the climate, even up to 5 years for it to produce its first fruit. I know that one of my very first favorite fruits to eat is a mango, which I believe was the fruit of the tree of life. But that's just personal opinion. I can't prove that or disprove it, so mango it is. But a mango tree takes up to 7 years to produce fruit. Pistachio also takes 7 years to produce fruit. Papaya trees, they're a bit quicker, 3 to 4 years to produce fruit. But the owner of the land had intended for this tree to be producing fruit in the allotted amount of time. And so he was very disappointed when he came, and he saw that this tree was old enough potentially to bear fruit, and it didn't. But here the story tells us is that the gardener said, hold on, let's wait, let's be patient, let's fertilize it, see what it does, and then we'll figure it out. It's interesting because in the context of this tree, of this parable, there are two parables that deal with judgment, that bookend this parable. And you find this parable where apparently the owner of the vineyard is pronouncing a judgment on this tree also. This is a unique story to the book of Luke in the Gospels. You don't find this particular parable in any one of the other messages, in any other one of the Gospels in the New Testament. Here's something else that's interesting. As I mentioned to you, it's sandwiched between two judgment accounts. The Galileans killed by the Romans in the temple, and the woman who was healed on the Sabbath. Both of these parables deal with judgment. But more importantly, Jesus uses the language and images that are familiar to his audience. The people that he's talking to understood the language of farming. They understood the language of planting and fertilizing and harvesting and reaping. So for them to hear this parable, it was simple. It was like Floridians talking about hurricane season. It comes with the territory. It's people who come in and move from the north, like I did when we moved to Naples. And hey, you guys gotta hold on tight, gather up, food because a hurricane is coming. And one came, and we were without power for 24 hours. And they were saying, get a generator. For those that have lived in Florida for a long time, a generator is a must-have in case power goes out. So he knew who he was talking to. So let's look at this parable a little bit closer. He was talking about a fig tree in a vineyard, which is interesting. You don't normally think of having other fruit-bearing trees inside a vineyard, but in this particular case, there was one. Secondly, he was seeking for fruit, and because he found any, he told them to cut it down. And lastly, he said, wait, let's hold on a minute. Let's see where this goes. Let me work with it. Trees. My son climbed his first tree when we moved to Florida. And I remember he came home, he was asking, before he went to climb the tree, he was asking, Dad, I want to play video games. I said, no, go play outside. Fine. And he did. He came back, Dad, guess what? I'm like, what? I climbed a tree. I said, you did? And how was it? He's like, Dad, did you ever climb a tree when you were little? I said, son, I've climbed plenty of trees. No way. His mind was blown because he never imagined, he could not imagine his dad climbing a tree. I said, son, I was your age once. I used to climb lots of trees. I've fallen from trees. I've cut down trees. I've set trees on fire. I've done all sorts of stuff with trees. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, how was it? Oh, it was pretty cool. From that day forward, for the next 6 months, every single day he came back from school, he was climbing that tree. Till one day he came back crying. And I asked him what happened. He said, I fell from the tree. I said, what happens? Like, I jumped and I grabbed onto this branch, and I swung, and my hand slipped, and I fell on my back. I said, it hurt, didn't it? He said, yeah, we need to cut that tree. I said, son, it's okay. He said, I'm never climbing a tree again. Okay. Next day, he was there, climbing that tree. But trees are also an important metaphor in the Bible. Notice that the gardener came to a tree that was supposed to bear fruit. But what does the Bible say about trees? Let's look at a few Bible texts that talk about trees. Psalm chapter 1 verse 3 says, he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The context of this particular verse says that the person who loves God will follow him. And the results of following the Lord is like being planted in a place where you're going to have the nutrients and the environment that are adequate for you to be strong, to be firm, to be planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season. Interesting. Fruit trees do not bear fruit year-round. Well, duh, Pastor Hart, we knew that. No, but think about it. Fruit trees bear their fruit in their season. There are times where we expect everyone to be producing all the time. But when we look at it from a perspective of church, we are not all mango trees. Or else all we would be eating would be mangoes. And we will starve for 9 months out of the year. The fact of the matter is that God in his wisdom planted and gave us fruit trees and nut trees and vegetables, that each season there are enough of its kind to produce so we have our fill. In the same way, church, when we have a church that is functioning well together, just like the Apostle Paul said, some are our hands, some are feet, some are eyes, some are nose, but we all come together and we produce different things at different times. We can't all be producing at the same time. So there are seasons, and seasons come and seasons go. And we're approaching a time where there's a season that we need to, and I think it's appropriate to mention this, that we need to fast. We need to pray. We need to look at what's going on, not just inside our own personal lives, but the lives, our church life, and we can even expand that into our nation. This is the time that we as Christians need to come together and pray. This is the season. Why? Because in due time, we will reap its fruits. The second verse of Psalm 92, verse 12, the second reference to trees is, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. I don't know if you can see this, but can you see the size of the person standing underneath this cedar tree? Right here. I've never seen a cedar this big. So when the Bible talks about the cedars of Lebanon, it's talking about great big trees. It's talking about a tree that is mature, a tree that has been cared for, that has been nourished, that has endured the harshness of the various seasons that it goes through. And it ultimately becomes a tree that provides shade and comfort for all those who come near it. The righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Are you flourishing? Are you growing? Are you producing fruits in due season? The third reference I want to give is in Isaiah chapter 61, verse 3. It says, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. The purpose of trees are not to be self-serving. Trees are to help those around them. Trees were designed for, as they grow, to provide for other living things. So if the Bible is comparing you to a tree to be tall and big like the trees of Lebanon, to flourish like a palm tree, to grow along the rivers where it's strong, it is not for you to produce fruit for yourself. It is for the welfare and the well-being of those around you. So when we find this context, we begin to see that the owner of this vineyard is looking at this tree and he's noticing all of those elements are not being fulfilled. All of these elements, they're not coming together to provide the fruit that it's supposed to be. The vineyard's a garden or a place where grapefruit is grown. But in the middle of this, there's this unique tree. Again, to highlight, in my perspective, the uniqueness of each one of us that are comprised of in the church life. He came to look for fruit, but he didn't find any. So he wanted to cut it down. What's interesting about this particular parable is that there is no conclusion. It ends. This parable does not tell me if the tree ever produced fruit. And don't confuse this story with the tree that Jesus cursed. This is not the same story. This particular parable just highlights the need of being a tree that produces fruit. Being a tree that in due season is putting forth what it was designed originally to do. But then there's this element that is thrown in here that Jesus adds a twist. The gardener says, hold on, that tree ain't quite dead yet. Let me fertilize it. And then the parable stops. It's like a cliffhanger. What happened? Did it produce fruit? Did it not produce fruit? There are many, many instances in my life, and I believe in your life too, that you have been going through the motions and going through the seasons, but not really producing fruit. Where you go through I'm going to study my quarterly, I'm going to read my Bible, I'm going to come to church, I'm going to help out occasionally with some of the things, what the church is offering, but not really producing fruit. And remember, if we're looking at the metaphor of a tree, and if each and every one of us are trees, we ought to be producing fruit for the well-beings of those around us, not for ourselves. In Christ Object Lessons, we find this statement: God in his Son had been seeking fruit and had found none. Israel was a cumberer of the ground. Its very existence was a curse, for it filled the place in the vineyard that was fruitful tree might fill. St. Petersburg Church Are you the fig tree in the vineyard, or are you the vineyard? In this particular parable, it is understood that the vineyard was producing fruit. But there is a highlight of the tree, the one tree that did not. These words come to draw our attention to our own spiritual well-being. Am I developing the fruits that God has designed me to produce? Am I going through the seasons, but I am not fertilizing my growth, my relationship with God? And by the way, fertilizers are not pleasant. If you have ever planted, you will know and you will quickly find out that they do not smell good. Growing up, my father one day, we had made a vegetable garden in the back of our house. And he called me out and he said, "Son, come here, I need your help." I said, "Sure." As I walked out, I was like, "Oh, what is that smell?" And he's like, "It's called fertilizer." I'm like, "I know, but what's it made of?" And he says, "Chicken dung." There are times in our lives where we need to do and go through the unpleasant things in order for us to be producing fruit. There are seasons in our life that require fertilization in order for us to strengthen, to reconnect, to force our spiritual development so that we may produce fruit. And that becomes unpleasant. And it may come in various forms, in struggles, in trials, and tribulations, and hardships. In all of these things, Paul said it pointed him to recognize who his Creator was. She continues by saying, it robbed the world of the blessings that God designed to give. The Israelites had misrepresented God among the nations. They were not merely useless, but a decided hindrance. To a great degree, their religion was misleading and wrought ruin instead of salvation. No, this is not an anti-Semitic statement, but it's a reference to the spiritual condition of the church of that time. Are we robbing the world of a blessing that God designed us to give? If this statement, if this question is one that is hard for you to answer, good. I hope that it gets your brain turning and thinking about, what is my purpose here? Because as I stated earlier, if we are adopting the metaphor of trees, we all have different fruits that we bear. And we all have different seasons in which to bear. And some of us here are bearing fruit right now. Others are getting ready to bear. Others are in the process of fertilization. Others are in the process of even being planted or transplanted. It doesn't matter where you fall in that metaphor. God has a plan for each and every single one of you, and He wants to make you flourish. He wants to make you produce fruit. He wants you to produce fruit. That's why you were created. See, we often interpret that text that Jesus says, by your fruits you shall know them, into, hey, look out for how your friends are, because you're going to mimic them, or are you doing things well? But in this context, by their fruits you shall know them, it has a degree of, if you are connected to the vine, if you are connected to Christ, you will produce fruit. And if you are not producing fruit, where is your spiritual walk with God at today? the gardener was still willing to work with such uncompromising plant. There's good news for you today. Jesus has not given up on you yet. Man, that was weak. Jesus has not given up on you yet. How do I know this? Because the gardener is Jesus, not the owner. The gardener is the one who's willing to work with you and meet you wherever you are. It doesn't matter what your experience, what your background, what you have done, what you haven't done. He says, wait a minute, there's a way around this. I may have to prune you. I may have to fertilize you. I may have to guide you in a direction for you to grow. And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pleasant, but it's going to be rewarding. One of the best things that I have the privilege of doing is baptizing people. I absolutely love it. And the thing that I hate the most is funerals. I hate it. But when you are able to see a person who was one way before they met Jesus, and now they're completely different, it is rejuvenating. It is reinvigorating. And if you have never brought somebody to Christ, you don't know what you are missing. Jesus wants you to find out. He wants you to learn firsthand what it feels like to bring something to Christ. And as I did in my previous church, I'm going to do this here. If you are studying the Bible with somebody, you're going to be in that tank with me baptizing that person. Because you were the one who was that influence. You were the one who led that person to Jesus' feet. You need to understand and what impact that has made in somebody else's life. So I want to challenge you today. But before I close, I want to share this with you. He also spoke this parable. A certain man had a fig tree. This is again the verse that we're looking at. He came to he planted the fig tree in his vineyard, and he came looking, seeking for fruit, and found none. And when he didn't find it, he said, cut it down. But the gardener was willing to work and said, let me work it, let me fertilize it, and then we'll see what happens. But check this out. In the book of Hosea, Hosea is an interesting book. In the 14th chapter, verses 1 through 8, and I want to read these with you, God is telling Hosea to tell the people. See, some people, when they look at the Old Testament and they see an angry God, a God who isn't merciful. Well, let me show you a glimpse of a merciful God in the Old Testament. It says, O Israel, return to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all graciously, for we will offer the sacrifices of our lips. Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say any more to the work of our hands, you are our gods. For in you the fatherless finds mercy. I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from him. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall grow like the lily and lengthen his roots like Lebanon. His branches shall spread. His beauty shall be like an olive tree, and his fragrance like Lebanon. Those who dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall be revived like grain, and grow like a vine. Their scent shall be like the wine of Lebanon. Notice all of these different colors on the screen. This is all the wonderful things God wants to do for you. You talking about grace? This is it. Look at how many things God said, listen, I'm going to make you flourish. I'm going to make you smell good. I'm going to make you clean. I'm going to make you strong. I'm going to make you thrive. This is not an angry God. This is a God who is desperate to have his people back. Because look at what he says at the very end. Your fruit, Ephraim. He says, Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard and observed them. I am like a green cypress tree. Your fruit is found in me. The fruit that God wants you to bear is found in him. And if you have not been producing fruit, maybe because you're in need of a pruning, maybe because you're in need of bending into the right direction, maybe because you might actually need to be fertilized with some unpleasantness in order for you to grow. Maybe, just maybe, it's because you've been wandering from the Lord and he's calling you back. He's calling you back because he says, listen, you want all these things? I have it. It's in me that you will find reward. It's in me that you're going to find peace. It's in me that you're going to find all the things that you're looking for. Where are you today in your spiritual walk with God? Are you a tree that is bearing fruit? Or are you a tree planted in the middle of a vineyard who is not, that needs work? No matter where you find yourself, your fruit is found in Jesus, in the God and the Creator who loves you, who died for you, who wants to see you thrive. He wants to see you prosper in him. That is the secret of becoming a well-established, mature, fruit-bearing tree. May God bless you. May God guide you. May he prune you. May he fertilize you so that you will bear fruit in season for his honor and glory.